She lingered in the corridor, silently taking in the sight of the bags, laptop, and his briefcase. They were neatly placed in an area she had overlooked when she first walked in. She returned to the office and took in the sight of the man shrouded in the low light. "This is madness, Lyle. You're walking out on me and our boys because of one spat? I made a single silly mistake while under the influence just hours ago. I wasn't with anyone. I didn't betray you. You're overreacting." His silence hung in the air until she moved closer, prompting him to raise his hand as if to stop her approach. She stopped in her tracks. She wondered if he was indeed having a breakdown. This man was not the husband she had spent 8 years with. A person couldn't change so drastically in just a few hours. He had never acted like this, not once, and the most perplexing thing was the lack of any clear trigger. Nothing of consequence had happened at the party. She took a step back but remained standing. "Can't you just tell me why? Can you at least give me that much?" "I had an epiphany," she heard him say, but the words made no sense to her. "Epiphany? What's driving you to do this, Lyle? I get that you think you're smarter than me, my family, anyone in this area. But why do you have to outshine us, make us feel inferior? Make it understandable for me." The shadowed figure shifted, tilting its head down as if to rest on interlocked fingers. "I am sincerely sorry, Diana. It's the truth. I don't want this. That's just the way English lit professors are wired to think and speak. It's not that it's hard to express. We all live our lives blind to the real substance of our existence, preoccupied with the trivialities, waking up, brushing our teeth, heading to work, paying bills, deciding what to watch on TV, handling the kids' sicknesses, fretting about putting on weight, or if our partners are looking elsewhere. Rarely do we take a step back to look at the bigger picture of where our lives are going, except on rare occasions." He stopped, and she stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. "Tonight, I had that epiphany. You talk about it, but what does it really mean? And what did you witness?" Though she couldn't see his face clearly, she felt his intense gaze upon her. She could almost feel the weight of his eyes on her skin. "I saw us, Diana. I saw who we are, who we were, and what we've become. It has next to nothing to do with tonight's event. You're right, leaving over one argument, one mistake, one incident would be crazy. That's not why I'm going. I'm going because I've realized our marriage was the mistake. I love you, but you don't love me. I can't and likely will never satisfy you sexually as you need to be. You're a good person at heart and won't leave because you're committed to your vows. And we're too young to destroy each other's lives for the next 40 or 50 years. That's why I'm leaving, right after our conversation, about 3 hours earlier. I pulled into the driveway at 9:30 p.m. Yet, my cell phone was silent. It had been silent since I left the Rivers Trailer Park south of Palatka at 8 p.m., where my wife and about 75 of her close and extended family and friends were reveling and dancing at the monthly celebration that had become a tradition over nearly all of our 8 years of marriage. We lived in Jacksonville, a city with a population of 1 million in Northeast Florida, about an hour and a half north of Palatka. The house was dark except for an automatic yard light with a sensor that illuminated the driveway as I walked, or rather limped up it. It had been a loud night, and I felt much older than my 34 years, closer to 74, but all I wanted was to quietly bring a 6-pack of light beer into the house. And that's exactly what I did. I turned on the kitchen light and sat where we usually ate our meals, instead of the small dining nook we were supposed to use. I popped open a Michelob, took a generous gulp of the chilled drink, letting it soothe my throat, then another. All the while, I was expecting the first ring from my phone, but it never came. I looked over the artwork that Billy, who is 5, produced at school using a magnetized pencil on the refrigerator door, and the photo of 7-year-old David during his initial catch in a Pop Warner football game. My throat felt tight, and I made a conscious effort to hold back tears as I took in the image of David's young, shadowy silhouette frozen in the time of his first athletic triumph. He took after his mother, possessing her dark locks and slim figure. Both of our boys had her dark hair, contrasting with my own light blonde strands, and shared her light brown eyes, unlike my icy blue ones. It was difficult to contain the surge of emotions they, along with their mother, were my whole world. Just hours before, I was on the verge of losing them, akin to standing frozen on train tracks at night with a train bearing down. I took another sip and let my head rest momentarily against the dark, textured surface of the table. After emptying the bottle, I forced myself to rise. Eventually, the phone would buzz and the front door would swing open, demanding my action before either occurred. I moved upstairs to the bedroom Diana and I had occupied for the past 5 years since moving to the more affluent Mandarin neighborhood, chosen for its reputable schools. I teach an introductory English literature course at Jacksonville University, a quaint, private liberal arts college on the far side of town. Despite the distance, I preferred living in Mandarin to the area around the university, accepting the long commute each day. Opening the closet, I spotted the 2 suitcases we took to the Bahamas on our last vacation 2 years ago. Then, I started to fill them with as many clothes as I could, packing enough pants, shirts, and jackets for a week. I didn't forget to include a shaver, toothbrush, toothpaste, some medications essentials for time spent away from home. As I leaned over the dresser, a wave of sickness hit me, but I fought it off. This departure marked an indefinite separation from all I held dear or once did, with no intent to return. Focusing too much on this would immobilize me, so I methodically packed everything needed to start over alone after 8 years of marriage. I found my laptop and my briefcase with important work documents. I placed them in the hallway leading to the dining room, to the left of the entrance. This wouldn't be immediately visible to anyone entering the home unless they ventured into the dining room. After packing everything I could think of, I grabbed a 6-pack of Michelobs, with 5 remaining, and headed to the office. The main entrance led to a corridor turning right towards the office. I settled into an armchair at the far end of the office, setting the Michelob on a glass coffee table in front. I switched off the floor lamp behind the chair. The hallway light could be turned on by someone entering. I climbed on a chair and adjusted the office's main light so it would emit minimal light when the entrance switch was used. With preparations complete, I reclined in the armchair amidst the darkness of what used to be my home, opened another Michelob, and began to drink it slowly around 11 p.m. My cell phone, a Nokia flip phone, rang for the first time. Diana's number illuminated the dark as the caller ID. I decided not to pick up. Around 3 minutes later, a voicemail notification appeared, which I ignored. My phone continued to ring at intervals after another 5 minutes. Then again 3 minutes later, followed by another call after 5 minutes, and then after 10 minutes and another 5. Diana initiated the sequence of calls, followed by her father Richard, her elder sibling Dave, then her younger sister Kelly, and Diana concluded the cycle. Had any humor lingered in existence, I might have perceived this chain of calls as amusing. Yet, any capacity for amusement I possessed had dissipated mere hours before, casting doubt on my ability to find joy in anything for a considerable span, possibly forever. The house phone was succeeded by the mobile phone's ring, and then the house phone chimed in again. I had just polished off my second Michelob and was embarking on my third. Time seemed to crawl, betraying my hope for it to rewind so the day that shattered my existence might relent and grant me a redo. Despite nurturing this universal human desire, I recognized that the roots of my troubles stretched back further than a day, necessitating a rewind of at least 8 years to repair the breach, an endeavor squarely in the realm of the impossible. November brought mild chilliness, but nothing excessive. The RV park and cabins near Lake Ko, just south of the campsite, were typically quiet during this season, presenting the perfect venue for Richard Carter, alongside family and friends, to host their monthly soirees, dances, and festivities in privacy, without noise complaints or police interruptions, offering a haven for relaxation. Carter, with his spouse Ricky, helmed a large family of 9, with 8 surviving offspring, and gatherings often swelled to include over 100 adults when relatives and friends joined, owning a road and asphalt paving. Enterprise catapulted them to millionaire status by the late 60s, and they relished organizing monthly Saturday night events. Such occasions invariably featured Southern rock, an array of fried chicken, ribs, seasonal oysters, and plentiful beer and spirits to suit varied tastes. Diana and I didn't make it to every gathering but tried to attend as regularly as possible. Richard and Ricky always extended warm hospitality to me, a Yankee stranger from Massachusetts, despite sometimes struggling to grasp my persona and livelihood. My profession wasn't in automobile sales, repair, construction, parking lot leasing, or any typical revenue-generating avenue familiar to their community. My role involved engaging with disinterested youths on topics like poetry, fiction, essays, and subjects the Carter clan deemed inconsequential, met with limited comprehension or interest. Drinking kicked off by midday, with cabins and trailers available for those needing to sleep off the effects. Diana and I would send our sons to a trusted friend's home, anticipating our return could be late that night or the next morning, reciprocating childcare when needed. An old concrete dance floor, reserved for Carter's occasions, and a loudspeaker setup were in place. We consumed food and drink sparingly as attendees arrived and commenced their revelries. By early evening, as it grew darker, the music amplified and the drinking escalated. Diana interacted with guests, while I stayed close to a table laden with food, picking at grapes. She moved elegantly in the diminishing light, dressed in a flowing white dress that hugged her form, highlighting her figure and generous bust. Her long hair fell smoothly down her back, rendering her the most breathtaking sight I had ever beheld. At these events, I often spent much time watching her, as neither dancing nor heavy drinking appealed to me. I was perfectly happy just admiring her, marveling at the thought that she could easily be swept off by an outsider from the crowd of local admirers longing for her allure. As often happens, the combination of alcohol, dancing, enticing women, and eager men does not always result in harmony. A former admirer of Kelly's sister boldly led her to the dance floor during a particularly lively song and danced suggestively with her in plain sight until her spouse, Billy, stepped in with a firm punch. Luckily, the situation de-escalated swiftly, with drinks shared, apologies made, the old flame receiving a kiss from his former love, and Billy and Kelly retreating to their preferred secluded area for their usual intimate moments. The pavilion was alive with attendees, among them Richard and Ricky moving to the beats of Southern rock, when it dawned on me that Diana was nowhere in sight. My spirits plummeted when I finally saw her. She was held close by a tall man with dark hair, his broad hands sweeping across her back, daring to descend too low, although she redirected them whenever they ventured too far. Before my time at the insurance firm, when I was transferring my vehicle insurance to their office, Bobby Trescott had already shown a keen interest in Diana. Diana was drawn to the novel, which included the allure of my foreign accent, and within 6 months we became husband and wife. Despite this, Bobby found it hard to move on, persistently phoning and dropping by, with Diana considering him merely a friend rather than a former flame. At these gatherings, he frequently danced uncomfortably close, touched her in ways that were not appropriate, and threw veiled insults my way, much to the enjoyment of some onlookers. I made my way towards them under the subdued lighting, observing their close dance. A sense of jealousy began to emerge. Diana, slightly tipsy yet not overtly so, appeared comfortable in his hold. Drawing nearer, I confidently interjected, "Hey Bobby, do you mind if I take over?" Diana looked at me with a serene, innocent grin. "Hello, love. I'm just dancing with Bobby here. I owed him this dance. It's a throwback to our prom night." "You don't mind me finishing it, right?" Bobby gave me a smug look, his hand sneakily moving beneath her shirt. In the low light, this audacious act went unnoticed by all but us. Diana gave him a confused look before facing me. I tried to interpret her expression. Was it irritation towards him, or towards me for letting it happen? Trying to keep my cool, I insisted, "Bobby, take your hand off my wife." His smile only grew broader. "Or what, Lyle? Honestly, who even is Lyle? Sounds like a child's name." "Oh, Lyle, you're too amusing." I paused. It had been years since I had resolved anything through physical confrontation. "Your opinion of my name doesn't matter. Remove your hands from my wife." Diana then grabbed his hand, forcefully removing it, prompting him to let her go. "All right, Bobby, ease up. Why must you always act so hostile towards Lyle? He's my husband, and he's not as bad as you make him out to be. You keep egging him on, thinking you can easily outdo him. It's unjust, and Lyle, I'm no child. Bob may be a bit drunk, but I know how to handle him. I've known him for the better part of my life. There's no need for you to stir up trouble to defend me." "Actually, I might have to be the one defending you." I was taken aback by her words and noticed several other couples nearby had heard our exchange and were chuckling. "What did you just say?" Her eyes widened, and I questioned if she had thought through her words before speaking. "Oh, Lyle, I'm so sorry, dear, that came out wrong. How could you say that?" Bobby shoved past her. "What she means to say is, mess with me, and I'll take you down and cause you serious harm, you persistent idiot. The only reason I haven't yet is because she begs me not to hurt you. What kind of man lets his wife stand up for him like that?" I couldn't stand someone who could perform simple math without using his fingers, someone who had taken your partner and fathered her 2 children. I doubted your ability to do the same, or even if you had the means to. I noticed security closing in, and simultaneously, a crowd began to form around us. Just as I was about to step back, I slipped on what appeared to be a spilled drink. I fell, landing on my rear and hitting my head on the solid floor. Dave, Diana's brother, and his friend quickly went to Bobby, holding him by his arms. The fall left me winded and slightly disoriented. Bobby made no attempt to free himself from their grip, likely seeing an advantage in the altercation. As to who's better equipped, Lyle, maybe you should ask Diana. She used to think highly of my equipment, and I've heard even a pencil would please her more than what you offer. Bobby snapped back. Richard Carter intervened firmly. "Enough, Bobby. Your presence is tolerated at our gatherings as you are an old friend, but now you've crossed the line. It's time for you to go." I raised my head to see Bobby grinning, then took in the reactions of those nearby. A few were trying to hide their amusement or outright smiling, while my wife's grave look caught my attention, revealing her amusement in the situation. She averted her gaze when our eyes met. "Dad, please. Bobby's just intoxicated. He didn't mean any harm," she argued. Her and Lyle's disagreements are minor. Plus, I had promised him this dance. Even Richard Carter looked at his daughter with surprise. "Really, Diana, even after Bobby's remarks about your husband?" She turned towards me with a neutral face. "Lyle's mature, Dad. If Bobby's behavior upsets him, he can deal with it, right? Love." I stood up, silently, and left my wife behind. Bobby's laughter followed me, along with the sound of suppressed giggles. I hoped Diana wasn't among them, but didn't turn back as I made my way off the dance floor. Richard caught up, offering his perspective as I left. "I get you're hurt, but listen. Diana does care about you, whether or not you see it now. However, sometimes even the best of women need to witness their men defend them. It might not be the norm where you come from, but around here, a man earns respect by not backing down from a challenger. Act as you see fit, but standing up to Bobby, regardless of the outcome, will show her your commitment." I kept walking. "Indeed, Richard. In my place, women don't provoke situations demanding their husbands defend their honor if there's true love and a real marriage." Now, I doubt both. He grasped my hand, and I stayed my urge to withdraw it out of respect. "Maybe you're correct about her indifference towards you. I'm just her father. I cannot interfere too much. Yet, I assure you, she has feelings for you. Don't make any hasty decisions. Go out, have a drink, and cool down. Things often sort themselves out." With that, I finally left him behind. The driveway was lit by the headlights of an arriving car at 12:45. After enjoying a couple of Michelobs, I was in high spirits. The sound of car doors and voices reached me. I slightly opened the window by my chair. Despite the interior being cool, their conversation from the sloped driveway sounded as though they were right next to me, allowing me to hear every word clearly. "He's here," said her elder brother Dave. "Thank goodness. What a disgrace. He's pitiful." "Settle down. You're clear-headed now, after causing such a fuss. Just be grateful he's here and not wandering off with someone else, as many would." "Stop it. He's my husband. A grown man who retreats and sulks, leaving his wife. What sort of partner does that? One whose wife openly flirts with an ex in his presence. That's who. If you weren't my sister and without children, I'd advise him to leave you for someone more respectful." I was astonished by their conversation. Diana had always epitomized the virtuous, church-attending Southern lady. These were the severest words I'd ever heard from her, even privately. Indeed, it had been a night full of upheavals. They entered the house, and soon a light turned on in the hallway. He came into the office, the light illuminating only the middle of the room while I stayed seated in the shadows. Dave entered the office first, followed by Diana. He looked around, spotted my figure in the armchair, and after a moment said, "Hey, Lyle." "Hi, Dave." A tense silence filled the room. I had no intention of engaging her in conversation. "Lyle," she eventually said. "What the deal is, Wyroli?" Diana was my calm, detached response. "Everything okay?" Dave asked. "I'm great. Thanks for checking, you idiot," she exploded, no longer able to hold back. "I love you too," was my reply. She became rigid, and without Dave's grip on her hand, she might have charged at me. Her hair was disheveled, her cheeks reddened, her makeup smeared, her white gown covered in blood and grime. The event must have turned chaotic in my absence. Constantly with the clever comments, right? "Do you think it's funny to abandon me, not informing anyone of your whereabouts, to simply disappear? Who does that? Perhaps an obstinate idiot? Too scared to face a guy who's openly flirting with his wife's bosom, with her approval, no less, in the presence of all their friends and family." She appeared sheepish, and Dave gave her a cautionary look. "We were concerned for you," Buddy Dave mentioned. "Why didn't you answer any of our calls?" "Wasn't in the mood for chatting," I mentioned as he rubbed his beard, glancing from Diana to me. "I'll let you two sort this out. It's been one heck of a night, a wild one. I'm feeling my age." "You sure you're all right, Lyle?" "Only asking to be courteous, Dave. I'm far from all right. Doubt I'll ever be. But you needn't worry about that. I appreciate you bringing Diana back. Personally, she might as well have left with Bobby or stayed at the trailer park." He gave us one final look, shook his head, and then told Diana, "I'll leave you too, Lyle. Diane, would you mind walking me out?" By their voices, I could tell they were near his Chevrolet Tahoe. Dave, any other guy would have faced Bobby, maybe gotten wasted, or acted out in some way. Something normal. Instead, he mopes around at home. I'd outmatch Bobby and Tommy and most folks we know. Lyle's different, he's not confrontational. You knew this when you married him. Remember, and I remember vividly, you said he's not the kind to come home with dirt under his nails, father a bunch of kids, binge drink every weekend, and disrespect you for gaining a few pounds. You said, and I quote directly, "He's someone who will be successful, take care of me and our kids, be faithful to me, and ensure a good life for us. He's a good man you wanted better, and you got it." Yet here you are, fretting over being with a man who avoids conflict, suggesting if Bobby hadn't had a chance before, he might now. I used to be proud of you, Diana. Now, I'm wondering if you're just another easy girl in fashionable shorts, destined for several divorces, bringing strangers home every other week, and stressing our parents with the turmoil you've brought to your life. Oh, Dave, grow up, I'm not naive. I was excited, maybe even flattered, but I wasn't blind. I flirted with Bobby because it was exhilarating to relive a bit of my youth for one night. My husband should have stepped in and set things straight, yet I forgot who I married. He's hurt now, but it'll pass. It was just one night, one fight. I'll reach out to him with love, and we'll get past this. A single argument doesn't end a marriage. Damn it, sister. You think because I build houses, I don't understand your dear husband. I deal with clients and partners whose children go to our school, they talk about Lyle. He's young, has hair, smart, and quite a few girls find him appealing. Once upon a time, he was in a position where achieving a grade of A or even C was within his grasp, and there were female instructors who, in essence, one was so overt in her advances that she received a caution from the dean to moderate her actions or face repercussions. Hence, go please him or undertake whatever is necessary to keep him, for he will not dwell on his sorrows over a beverage for long. She made her re-entry and lingered at the entrance of the office for a significant duration. We both remained silent. Subsequently, she advanced towards me. Raising my hand, I instructed, "Halt, position yourself there near the TV." This evidently caught her off guard, as reflected in her facial reaction. She had anticipated she would come close, crouch at my feet, give me a quick hug, then proceed to initiate a kiss, paving our way to the bedroom. Nevertheless, that was not to be our fate. She took a deep breath. "I get it, Lyle. My conduct today was appalling. Spare me the lecture. I've been reprimanded by others already. Honestly, it seems everyone acts as though they're intimately connected to you and I'm just an outsider. Yet, I was under the influence, as was Bobby. It's common knowledge that Bobby and I have a past. Think back to our early days we met back in elementary school. Can you believe it? And it's important for you to remember this. He still carries feelings for me, struggling to come to terms with the fact that I chose you to be my partner. I know it's not right, but at times I can't help but feel sorry for him. So, your solution is to ease his sadness by getting close to him. Irritation flared in her eyes. He's grieving a little, flirting brightens his day. That was all my intention until your forceful intervention, and things escalated beyond intended. There's no excusing that. He's a friend, you are my husband, the one I love. Soon after, she found herself seated in an upright chair, intentionally chosen for its lack of comfort. Not to change the subject, Diana, but there's something I'm curious about. I left the campsite at 8. It wasn't until 11 that my phone indicated you noticed my absence. Given the campsite's size and all the activities, but after that incident, it took you 3 hours to realize I was missing. This indicates to me how much or how little I mean in your life. Her eyes lit up with frustration, and she was about to speak when suddenly she remembered something and stopped herself. Oh my God, Lyle, don't you understand? After you left, everything turned chaotic. I honestly forgot about you, as did everyone else momentarily, but that doesn't diminish my care for you. It's simple. Fine, what happened then? Bobby and I danced a bit afterwards. I admit I shouldn't have. But I was very frustrated with you. I know you're not one to start a fight, but to be honest, it makes me seem childish. Yet it hurt me that you didn't confront Bobby. If he had hit you, I would have been there to provide love and support, which I needed. You are my husband, yet you were nowhere to be found. So yes, I was angry. I danced with him. And after a while, Bobby, feeling the effects of alcohol, excused himself to go to the bathroom. Knowing Bobby, I thought he might wander off to the lake or behind a cabin. I engaged in conversations with various people and briefly stopped thinking about Bobby. About 30 minutes later, I started wondering where he had gone. I wasn't worried about you because you often take off, and we usually don't see each other until later in the evening. Then, a scream was heard and everyone ran towards the lake. A crowd gathered around someone on the ground. Getting closer, I was horrified to see it was Bobby, in a terrible condition. His face was covered in blood, one eye completely shut. I was told his arm and several fingers were broken. Dave and a few others were there, suggesting we call the sheriff. 3 belligerent men had attacked Bobby, angered by his interruption of their space. In the scuffle, they got the better of Bobby, who managed to hurt some of them seriously. But they were too many for him. Afterward, pandemonium broke out. We called for an ambulance for Bobby, and the sheriff's department sent patrol units to check the area for the assailants or any suspicious persons. Eventually, people started ensuring everyone was safe. I documented her account, leading to an unavoidable question. It took more than 3 hours after becoming aware of the dangerous individuals in the park to inquire about your missing spouse, I pointed out. It seems I should be a top priority for you, I observed. She clenched her lips, avoiding eye contact. Then it dawned on her. You weren't at the park, right? You wanted to be with Bobby at the hospital to stand by him, correct? Eventually, she looked at me. He suffered serious injuries, Lyle. He was in pain and asked for me. I couldn't turn him down. Bobby is hard to reject, isn't he? Please, Lyle, don't act like this. It was an act of kindness. If you weren't so upset, you'd see. He was a close friend. One you were close to before I came along. It was only right to be there for him in his moment of need. So you were close to him before, correct? Her gaze fell, then locked with mine again. Yes, Lyle, and you knew it. We had a serious relationship back then, I was fully aware. Our intimacy was frequent, knowing this might offer you some comfort. And yes, before you ask, he was gratifying. Does that make me appear loose? And you? I know you had your experiences before we got married. Should your past make me feel insecure? No, that's the past, and this is now. Indeed, he wanted my presence, and I obliged. I held his hand that wasn't injured. A paramedic was there, and we were surrounded by people the whole time in the emergency area while he was being treated. Nothing happened, Lyle, and even if we had been alone, he would not have considered making a move. You have no grounds for jealousy. Did I suggest I was jealous? There's no need for it. I can see it in your face whenever he's close to me. I guess I can't blame you. It would greatly disturb me too if you were constantly with another woman, especially one you had been involved with before me. Have you thought about how that makes me feel? She diverted her eyes again, trying not to make eye contact. Lyle, it's unfair to ask that. There was so much going on. Bobby was injured, people were connecting, so no, I haven't. Who showed interest in me first and when? Her gaze remained averted. They looked after Bobby. Then his brother came to take him home. I returned to the camp with Kelly and Billy. When I got back, Dad came up to me, asking if I had seen you. That's wonderful, Diana. Your dad cares enough to notice I was missing before my wife. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at me. Keep it up, Lyle. I've made a mistake, and now you're going to punish me even more for it. Fantastic. Now I feel even guiltier. Sorry, my conscience must be bothering me, right? It's hard for me to say because I didn't cheat on you. She just looked at me and lowered her gaze again. We sat in silence for a while. Well, at least that's settled, dear, she gave me a puzzled look. Why? I stayed because I wanted to discuss this before I left. Where are you going? You're not mad at me anymore, right? I noticed her disheveled, dirty appearance, the blood on her white dress, and realized I had never seen anything more striking. And I'll never see you again. I have things to do that I've been putting off until we had this talk. Then I'll find a place to stay, maybe a cheap hotel, and by Monday I'll find a permanent place and talk to a lawyer a place for us to stay overnight. Are you serious? Lyle? What are you suggesting? Did we just have an argument? It's sad, but I love you. People don't just run away because of one fight. What happened, Lila? We were happy this morning. What could have changed in less than a day to make you want to leave? I didn't answer her. I just motioned towards the hallway leading to the kids' rooms. Go, I said. She reluctantly got up and went to the other room. I knew she would find the suitcases, the laptop, my briefcase. She made her way back to the office, her steps growing more reluctant as she shook her head, seemingly in shock at the scene before her. This is madness, Lyle. You're leaving me and our boys because of one disagreement? I committed a single, stupid mistake while drunk just a few hours ago. I wasn't unfaithful. I didn't cheat on you. Your reaction is just unreasonable. As I kept quiet, she moved closer to me, prompting me to lift my hand again to stop her. She stepped back but remained standing. Could you at least tell me why? At that point, it dawned on me. She was utterly unaware of what I was actually talking about. What's the reason for this, Lyle? I get that you think you're smarter than me, my family, everyone here. But why do you need to prove that we're dumber compared to you? Make me understand in a way that I can. And she was right. I had underestimated the intellectual superiority I held over Diana and her relatives. I failed to see my own arrogance in simply using my mind over manual labor, significantly surpassing any academic success achieved by Diana's family. I'm deeply sorry, Diana, but that's just the truth. I didn't want it to be this way. This is what English literature professors believe and say. It's not too hard to explain. We all just wander around, never truly seeing the full picture of our lives. We're distracted by the small stuff: waking up, brushing our teeth, going to work, paying bills, watching the evening news, managing our kids' illnesses, worrying about gaining weight, or if our partners are looking elsewhere. Seldom do we stop to consider the overall trajectory of our lives. I stayed quiet for a moment before admitting that tonight I had an epiphany. You often say this, but what does it mean, and what did you see? Expressing these thoughts was challenging. It was the most difficult conversation I've ever had because I knew I was undoing our shared existence, my life with our two sons whom I love above all. Yet she deserved to understand why I'm leaving. I saw our life, Diana. I understood who we are, who we were, and who we've turned into. It has little to do with the party incident. Indeed, leaving because of a single fight, mistake, or incident would be senseless. That's not why I'm going. I'm going because I've come to realize our marriage was a mistake. I love you, but you don't feel the same towards me. I probably can't satisfy you sexually as you deserve. At your heart, you're a good person who wouldn't leave me because you're committed. And we're too young to ruin each other's lives for the next several decades. That's my reason for leaving. When our conversation ended, she nodded, beginning to cry. I realized she was grieving over a life ending, just as I was. The fact she didn't love me the way I loved her didn't mean love was absent, but it wasn't enough. How can you say such things, Lyle? How can you be so cruel? Look at me, Diana. Answer me 2 questions, and if I'm wrong, I'll think again. Her face showed fear, as she likely guessed what I would ask. Have you ever cheated on me? Have you been with someone else since we got married? Her silence and her look gave me my answer. Thank you. That's one reason I love you. You could lie or evade, but you're too honorable. You can't lie, and you're unwilling to speak the truth, knowing it would break my heart, but we both know the answer to that question. Your silence tells me everything. And the second question, do you love me? Diana, I care for you, Lyle. Why would you doubt that that's not what I asked, Diana? Do you love me? I don't understand. You love your family, our kids, your brothers and sisters. I know you'd do anything for them, but being in love is different. It's the shortness of breath when looking at the man who makes your heart race, excites you with a simple kiss on the neck, a touch on the chest. The one you dream about and long for when he's not around. That's how I feel about you. I'm not sure you've ever felt that way about me, but I know you don't feel it now. You would be an excellent sister, but not a wife. Is this it? She asked, drawing near. Is it just about physical closeness, Lyle? Is that what's really bothering you? Are you upset because I don't always show desire in the bedroom? I moved toward her into the light. As I stepped into the illumination, she recoiled with a start. Oh my goodness, she exclaimed. You've never called me Diana before, and you've never shown as much enthusiasm vocally as with others. You just lie there, letting me take the lead. Do you really think I'm unaware of your boredom with our physical relationship? She paused, her hand trembling as she gently touched my face, her fingers lightly exploring the swollen skin around my nearly closed left eye. I knew my face bore shades of yellow, red, and brown. My lips were swollen, with a small piece missing from the left side. Oh my God, they got to you and beat you as well. Why didn't you seek medical attention at the hospital? I tried to smile, which must have looked horrifying based on Diana's reaction. You should see the other guy, I said, and from the evolving expression on her face, it was clear she understood the depth of my injuries. I stayed in the shadows near the lake, listening to the music, and I imagined I could still hear bits of laughter from the crowd around Diana and Bobby. I didn't need to go back to know she was dancing with him. Facing Bobby was an option. I had taken beatings before, when I wandered the streets of South Boston as a young, fatherless boy, often getting thrashed trying to keep pace with older teens, until my mom wisely decided to move us to a small town south of Boston, away from the gang violence. The beatings didn't faze me much, and they probably wouldn't now, because I had no delusions of besting him in a fair fight. He was bigger, stronger, and undoubtedly more skilled than someone who made a living teaching in front of a classroom. However, it was the look in her eyes as she allowed Bobby to hold her and touch her, his hands gliding over her with a disturbing familiarity, that compelled me to confront Bobby's insulting behavior. I had perhaps always known, but now I couldn't ignore the reality that they had been close before. Another had been the center of my world, sharing with him what she'd never share with me. How does one rebuild a life on lies? I leaned against a tree, staring at the cloudy night sky, wondering how to repair a life that had veered so off course and make it right once more. How does one forgive a woman who means everything to you when she has shared herself, and possibly her love, with someone else? I pondered if they laughed at me during their intimate moments. Did she really speak of me with contempt? Am I truly that unimportant, or is he just that significant? I didn't see myself as lacking in that aspect. I had never received any complaints. I heard someone stumbling through the brush and crashing into trees, a figure moving clumsily toward the lake, stopping a few yards from me, facing the dark water. He didn't look back but started to urinate. Even without seeing his face, I knew who he was. Initially, I hadn't planned on violence, as it rarely solves anything. So, it was quite surprising when he turned around and felt my fist smash into his face with all the force of my charge, the impact amplified by my momentum. He spun and fell, silent except for a groan upon hitting the ground. Before he could get up, I kicked him hard in the stomach, lifting him off the ground, eliciting a sharp cry. I tried for another kick lower down, but he twisted, taking the hit on his thigh and grabbing my leg. As I pulled back, he pushed me away. I lost my balance, falling backwards. Supporting myself on my elbows, I looked into the darkness. He was already on all fours. He felt his forehead and found something wet and shiny. My glancing blow had split the skin, likely from the college ring on my right hand, adorned with 2 diamonds in tiny settings. Condemn me, Lyle. I never imagined you possessed such strength, you frail one. Indeed, you resorted to ambushing me, but you somehow found the guts to make an attempt at striking me. However, I am about to inflict a considerable amount of agony on you, lad, and I will have every right to, because I will inform everyone, Diana included, of how you recklessly assaulted me. As I made an effort to stand, he pounced. I collapsed under his broad, hefty form, struggling to extricate myself. He got up a bit and clenched his fist. The punch was unforeseen, and it was agonizing. It was as if my head had been hit with a steel instrument. My ears began to buzz, and the vision in that eye briefly faded to black. Next, my nose took a hit, blood poured out, and for a moment I couldn't draw breath. Before my senses could recover, agony engulfed me once more, and I was blind. I worried he had rendered me sightless, but after I pushed him off momentarily, I realized it was merely the blood streaming into both eyes that blinded me temporarily. I could hardly shift my head, yet I'm puzzled how I did it because his subsequent strike missed its mark, and he stumbled to the ground. I sprang up, and as he was on his knees, I hit him with my boot's bottom. Witnessing the blood jet and sensing his nasal bone and cartilage collapse under my foot was gratifying. He collapsed backward, moaning, making inarticulate noises. I went for another kick, but he evaded and drove his fist deep into my gut, then pushed me off. I staggered back, struggling to breathe. Every inhalation felt as though a sharp object was piercing through my chest. The ruffian had fractured my ribs. He repositioned himself and got up on all fours. His crushed nose and animal-like snorts in the obscurity brought back memories of a perilous wild boar that I had tracked with Richard Clark in the early days of my union. His eyes were void of any humanity, and fear took hold of me. He aimed not just to wound me. I believe he had become detached from reality and would have taken my life if possible. I had to get on my feet because I couldn't afford to be down by him again. I was aware that if he managed to overpower me, he would use his greater mass and strength to finish me. Doubtful of my ability, yet when he lunged again, I swerved and sidestepped him. He fell forward onto his hands and knees, propping himself on his left arm and extending his right for stability. I didn't pause. Such a technique was unfamiliar to me from any combat sport or UFC bouts. I grabbed his extended right arm, pulled it straight, and bore down on his back with my elbow, forearms, knees, and full body weight. A snapping sound ensued, and his cry pierced the air. He squirmed, attempting to throw me off, but I gripped tightly, tugging at his limb over and over. Eventually, he rolled onto his back, and before he could fend me off, my knees landed on his elbow and forearm. He opened his mouth to scream, but found himself breathless. I hammered at his elbow repeatedly, then pressed down with all my weight, immobilizing him as he floundered like a hooked fish. Finally, I let go and reclined. I no longer harbored any fear of him. He hugged his arm close, rolling side to side on the turf, weeping and gasping for air. I might have felt some regret for harming him, but this man had absconded with my spouse and likely shattered my matrimonial bliss, costing me 2 children, so my empathy was limited. As he whimpered, I noticed the distant strains of Southern rock music still playing. No one called out. No one had witnessed anything. I approached him once more, seizing his wounded limb. He made a feeble attempt to hit back, but I twisted his arm repeatedly, eliciting cries of pain, and quickly his defiance ended. "You've triumphed, you've shattered my arm, and you're indifferent. Curse you," he sobbed. "I'm defeated. I require assistance. I must seek medical attention." Time passed, and then Bobby suggested, "Let's deal with this situation." At the outset, my intention was to summon help after delivering several blows with my inflamed elbow, which prompted him to rethink his position. I grasped his right wrist and pulled it from my form. He was too weakened to contest. With my right hand, I took hold of his little finger, and with my left, I pressed it downwards to immobilize his grasp. "I'm going to ask some questions, Bobby, and you're going to unveil the truth," I declared. I held his little finger tightly and torqued it back until I sensed the joint give way, leaving it hanging limply from his hand. His eyes bulged, and he might have screamed had I not struck him with full force in the solar plexus, driving the wind out of him. He gasped, wheezing for breath, and groaned. I waited until I judged he was alert to me once more. "Each time you tell a falsehood or I find your answer unsatisfactory, I'll break another digit, Bobby. And once your fingers are done, I'll move on to your toes, then other bones," I threatened. After a while, he gave a slight nod and rasped, "You're in control, Lyle. I'll tell you what you want, but there will come a time when I'll be on top, and you'll disappear. Your remains will be tucked away in a 20-meter marsh, unseen by all. Maybe, but for now, I need to know the duration of your affair with Diana." He fell quiet briefly. "Are you asking about this time or before? I know you were with her before we crossed paths." "I mean since our marriage." I pressed. He gave a taunting smile, which tempted me to snap another finger, but I decided to save them for when they might be needed most. "Roughly 4 years," he admitted. "How did it start? How often?" His smile faded, and from his tone, I sensed his candor. "I've been chasing her since you got hitched. I tried it all, hung around her office, watched her house, tried to make her laugh, yet she never strayed. It irked me. Then, about 4 or maybe 4.5 years ago, she came up to me as I was exiting a 7-Eleven. With no smiles or flirtation, she asked if I fancied a coffee. That day, nothing happened, nor for the following 6 months, but she kept seeking me out, and ultimately we ended up at my place, and she was fervent. She was unrestrained, did everything a woman might, as if she truly wanted it. It was extraordinary. I almost lived out my 4-year fantasy with her in a single day. He tried to chuckle but instead spat out blood and what looked like a piece of a white tooth. He exhaled slowly and continued, "I thought she'd leave you the next day. When I went to your house and she slapped me as I tried to touch her, she screamed, threatening to call the cops and accuse me of assault. Enraged, I thought about killing her. She was nothing but a lying fraud, and I left, steering clear of her for 3 months. I've never been so furious." Then, one day he spat again and laid his head back on the turf. She showed up at my place, silently came in, and we holed up in the bedroom for 2 full days. She told me you had taken the boys to your mother's in Massachusetts for the week. We were together for 5 straight days. He shook his head, giving me a grin that was almost friendly, a boyish look on his battered visage. "I thought I recaptured her interest, but as soon as you returned, she wouldn't see me. Whenever I came by while you were there, she'd be cordial, but that was at no intimacy, nothing further." He tried to shift his restrained hand, wincing as I applied a slight pressure to it. "And that's how things have been for the last 4 years. Periodically, every few months, she would come around, and we would engage in a relentless cycle that left us spent for a day or two. After which she would go back to you, acting as if our encounters never occurred." I endeavored to process his words. This wasn't some short-lived dalliance. It had been 4 years of deceit, her contentment with a man whose hands weren't calloused from labor, who offered her a life of ease. The sole burden she bore was his lackluster passion. He bellowed once more and thrashed wildly, yet I subdued him until his resistance waned. "Forgive me, I didn't intend." "Injury, it slipped my mind," I uttered. "Your demise will be a gradual one." I couldn't bear to listen further. It was like tearing open an old wound, but my need for knowledge prevailed. I seized his 3rd digit, and he almost struck me clumsily before recognizing my power to cause pain was unchallenged. Thus, her fidelity was anchored in financial stability. Without it, she might have abandoned me for your so-called nobility. "That's the entirety," he whispered, then snickered scornfully. "You're naive. You're missing the point. Aren't you, and what is it that eludes me?" I inquired. "She's indifferent to your wealth." "I handle an excavator and my earnings are comparable to yours," he disclosed, echoing her words to him one day. "And you're oblivious to the fact that Richard and Ricky planned their estate division before their demise. Soon she'll possess the capacity to surpass you economically. You fail to grasp the essence of true love. That's why she cherishes you, you imbecile. It's inexplicable to me. Her love for me is why she endures you. You're clueless, aren't you? She finds more delight in her intimate gadgets than she ever found with you. She once admitted to dozing off amid your lovemaking. That's the extent of your allure. She tries to stay devoted, but her yearning overpowers her. Despite her resistance, she seeks me, and I satiate her needs. During our courtship, I used to affectionately call her loquacious. She was the most fervent lover I've encountered, and you dull her for the initial time. He gazed at me, and I was consumed by an unprecedented homicidal fury. I was capable of snuffing out his existence. Instead, I opted to fracture yet another of his digits. I placed my palm on his neck to stifle his outcry. Once his cries ceased, I released him, unfastened my trousers, and clasped him firmly below the belt, exerting ample pressure. "Mercy," he implored. "Mercy," what I probed, tightening my grip. The act wasn't arousing since he was flaccid, but it inflicted agony. I realized that while I might not gratify her as you do, I was convinced you wouldn't gratify her or any other woman henceforth. I had the choice to either squeeze with great force or to use the foldable blade in my left pocket. Remember the individual whose spouse amputated his manhood years back? He gained notoriety in the adult film world post-surgical reattachment. I contemplated hurling it into the lake, wishing for a fish or turtle to feast on it. Indeed, the notion of altering you so drastically was enticing. For the initial time, I observed authentic terror in his eyes as he grasped the possibility of losing his virility. I doubted his capacity to endure such emasculation. Suddenly, revulsion at the prospect of maiming a man due to my wife's infidelity overwhelmed me. He was merely behaving as many men might. The betrayal was hers, not his. I let him go, and he scuttled back defensively. As I rose and allowed his mangled hand to fall, I commenced my departure. Then he uttered, "You deem me the antagonist? I'm the one who ensnared your spouse, shattering your idyllic union." I didn't look back, yet I sensed he was crying. "You've wrecked it all." She was on the brink of becoming my spouse, you see, and she would have indeed. Her 2 kids would have been my responsibility. She had love for me, or was on the verge of it. Since our early school days, we've been inseparable. Our connection was intense, our natures similar, and we would have been happy. Then you appeared, with your eloquent speech and striking looks, sharing tales of experiences she never knew or dreamt of, and you lured her into thinking you were her soulmate. I glanced back at him. "You poor fool. I am the best thing in her life. You just couldn't stand that I charmed her completely." Perhaps you're right, wise man. Observe the happiness it brings her and those around her. She tried to love you, to tolerate a life without passion, trying to endure in a relationship that's crushing her soul. I lost the woman I loved and truly deserved. I had to skulk around to be with her, watching her come home with you from those events. And you, pitiful man, will always be second best to her. Every time you're with her for the rest of your life, you'll know she's thinking of me. It would be unbearable for me, but a weakling like you might find it tolerable. She looked at me silently. I think he was hesitant to admit that one mistake could ruin him so completely, so he concocted this story of evil bikers. Therefore, he confessed everything to me. Diana and I believed him. People usually don't make up stories when they're being coerced by pain. My God, 4 years. 4 years, and he made you scream each time. Was he really that much? Bigger than me, tears streaked down her face. I couldn't believe that part of me hated her, but a large part of me still loved her. No love, maybe a bit, but that doesn't matter. It's hard to explain. It's been like that from the first time. No other man has ever affected me like that. It was like being hit by lightning. It's not a perfect comparison, but it's the best I can do. And I thought, if I told you that I found you dull, that you didn't excite me like he did, maybe we could try new things, like toys or even drugs. But how could I tell the man I loved that another man made it better? But with you, it was just fine. I knew you wouldn't stand for it. No one's ego could. Why didn't you leave if he was so great? Because it wasn't just about him, it was the sex that was amazing. I love you, I reached out, stroking her cheek, catching a tear. I know you're not in love with me, but I think you do have love for me and what we had. I left the rest unsaid as I moved past her, loading bags and a computer into our family vehicle, a Saturn. I decided to leave the larger Ford Escort for her and the kids. It took 3 tries, but finally I finished the task and went back inside. She stood still, arms outstretched as if to hug me, then let them drop. I don't want this, love. I'm not sure how to fix this, but there must be a way. No, there isn't. I leaned in for a kiss, tasting her salty tears. Our marriage was over. I want to stay involved with the boys, but us is no more because you loathe me. I looked into her shining eyes. No, I love you. That's what makes this so hard, but you can't resurrect something that's dead. We could see a therapist, maybe a sex therapist, anything, but we won't because deep down you don't want to be my wife anymore. How can you say that? Door. Remember, I said that silence can speak volumes. I know you don't really want to save our marriage because since I told you I was leaving, you haven't once said you want me to stay. Those would have been my first words to you, but you never uttered them. Our gazes met, and the question was clear in her eyes. She never begged, please don't go, don't leave. When she realized, she crumpled, covering her face with her hands, weeping as I walked out. Subscribe to our channel so you won't end up as someone else's fallback. And keep listening for the next story, because what comes next makes this tale seem tame by comparison. If you're under 18, refrain from even considering the next one.